1926 was the height of the Roaring Twenties and a pivotal year in Hollywood. The Roosevelt Hotel, built in 1926, played a key role in the life of those whose stars shone bright during the golden age of Hollywood. Do the ghosts of famous actors now haunt the Roosevelt's halls? Of course they do, and we're going to tell you all about it. She was the Oprah of 1926, America's first radio televangelist with a nationwide following, claiming she had the power to heal thousands with her touch. One day, while swimming at Venice Beach, this famed evangelist goes missing. It's a true crime spectacle that consumes the summer. Then, she turns up in Mexico 5 weeks later. What really happened during that strange season that rocked Los Angeles and the nation? We'll tell you all about it on the Haunted Hollywood Hour podcast.
You are listening to the Haunted Hollywood Hour. I'm Tanya Dixon, and I am here with Carly Heath.
Hi.
And we are going to share with you all the spooky, cool, woo-woo stories from Hollywood and beyond. My story is about the iconic Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard. Lots of cool celebrity names from the past and the present have stayed there, and there are some haunting things that go on.
I am telling you about a 1920s era Christian evangelical who was basically the Oprah of the 1920s. She was the first evangelist to use mass media to raise her profile. She had a level of fame on par with Charles Lindbergh, Babe Ruth, Rudolph Valentino. You get the idea. But one day she disappears from Venice Beach while swimming. It starts a nationwide media frenzy. She's presumed dead. Still, the newspapers continue with headlines every day about various theories of what happened to her. And then 5 weeks later, she turns up in Mexico.
Oh my goodness. Alive?
Alive. What happened? We delve into her whole life story and what happened during that 5-week period.
I cannot wait to hear this.
Where she disappeared.
You guys, I don't know Carly's story either, so This is going to be a discovery for us all.
And also this woman, Aimee, she was the inspiration for the Paul Dano character in Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood.
I've seen it.
It's one of my favorite movies.
It's one of my favorites too. Love it. Should we watch that?
I know, yeah. Tanya, what is the spookiest thing to happen to you recently?
I don't know if I would call it spooky, but it is a lovely coincidence. And are there any coincidences, right? I was looking at pictures of my beloved soul dog, Sparky, who I lost 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I had a good friend that she had her dog, 3 dogs actually, that were Sparky's best friends. And we lost touch over the years. We had a falling out. And right when I started I don't look at Sparky's pictures often because I get so sad. And I miss him so, so much. But anyway, I was looking at some pictures of him recently, and this friend that I'd lost touch with for 5 years, I get a message from her. That's kind of woo-woo. And it's connected to her because our dogs were best friends. So we did everything together.
And you just hadn't heard from her in 5 years, and then you're looking at a picture of Sparky, and she calls.
That night, she sent a message.
Wow, that's really
pretty cool.
Did you talk at all about Sparky?
We talked about Sparky and her dog, Alvin, and her little Pekingese that we called the Gremlins, Geody and Jazz.
Oh.
Yeah, and we really missed each other. We had a falling out. This is a good lesson in life. You know, we all have different friends. Some are for a season, some are for a lifetime, some are for lessons, some are for joy. And we've been friends for over 30 years, and we hadn't talked in 5.
Wow.
So, yeah, we've reconnected, and our friendship, it just picked back up, and we have these beautiful memories of our 4 dogs.
So, do you want to do your story first?
Sure. We're going to talk about the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. Have you been there, Carly?
No, never.
Haven't?
I biked past it on my way to work, but I've never been in, no.
Wow. I haven't been in any of the rooms, but I've been at the Cinegrill, which is the nightclub there, and quite a few film-based events are hosted there. We're going to talk about it because there's a lot of history there. that's non-haunted, and then there's a lot of history there that is haunted. Okay, you guys, we're going to travel back in time to 1926, which was a really big year for Los Angeles. That was fashion-wise when flapper style was all the rage. And
Prohibition. No one is allowed to drink legally.
No one's allowed to drink. All the women cut their hair short. And Coco Chanel in 1926, she created the little black dress.
Yeah, cut on the bias.
Yep, cut on the bias and translated to ready to wear as like a staple kind of thing. So that was 1926. Films were silent, hair is short, and America, guess what, only has 48 states.
The KKK is rising, which is really a big bummer.
Wow, that is a huge bummer.
It was a bad time.
Wow. There was a census in 1920, and this is 1926 we're talking about. But Los Angeles grew from 577,000 people to, get this, by 1929, 1.2 million.
Wow.
Very, very interesting. The Great Gatsby was published the year before, which is an iconic film now and one of my favorite stories.
I don't think it was a big deal back in 1920s.
Yeah.
It had to age like fine wine.
Which it has.
Yeah.
NBC, most of us know NBC, the network. That was the year that the broadcasting company was founded. National Broadcasting Company it was called, and it was owned by General Electric, AT&T Corporation, and get this, United Fruit Company, Chiquita Brand International.
Chiquita Bananas. Yeah. And maybe that's like why we say that's bananas whenever. Maybe it's a big old conspiracy when people are like, that's crazy. People say that's bananas.
That's bananas.
I have no idea. That's just that's
a weird
propaganda theory.
Fun fact. So Louis B. Mayer in 1926, he wanted to short circuit the growing labor union. So that's when he created this kind of an umbrella organization and really began the hub of the film industry.
Yeah, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences.
Yeah. I don't know if you've been to any of these, Carly. You probably have. I have. But in 1926, Orpheum Theater, El Capitan Theater, where Jimmy Kimmel hosts his show, and the 28th Street YMCA all opened 1926. Have you been to the Orpheum?
I haven't been to any of those places.
Wait, what?
No, I know.
Okay, we need to go on a Carly tour of Hollywood.
I know.
Oh,
I know.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Iconic, all of them. Have you been to LA's Central Public Library? Because,
yes.
Okay,
yes.
I have not.
Oh, wow.
No,
okay.
That opened in 1926.
Yeah, the Central Library is amazing. It's beautiful. It's underappreciated. It's gorgeous, and it's huge, and you can find some really old, cool stuff there.
Wow. Is downtown?
Yeah.
The Shrine Auditorium was rebuilt. Have you been to the Shrine?
Yes, for the SAG Awards.
Oh, that's right. Hello. I have not been to the Shrine. And then in 1926, Douglas Fairbanks starred in The Black Pirate, a silent action adventure film shot entirely in 2-color Technicolor. And this was a film about an adventure in a company of pirates. The Black Pirate was the third feature to be filmed in an early 2-tone Technicolor process that had been introduced in the 1922 feature The Toll of the Sea. Have you seen that?
Okay, so The Black Pirate has a very iconic scene. Douglas Fairbanks takes a knife out and he stabs his knife into the sail of a pirate ship, and then he slides down the sail while holding the knife, and the knife is cutting through the sail, and he's kind of like paragliding down the sail. It's a very iconic scene that's repeated a lot in like cartoons and like Bugs Bunny.
Yeah. Did they do that in our flags?
No, they didn't.
They need to do that.
They didn't. But I also just like that it's called The Black Pirate, and that it's a pirate adventure, and it's the first color.
We love ourselves
film.
A pirate adventure, especially a particular one. But
I know
we can't digress, or we'll be talking about nothing but that.
Yeah.
Douglas Fairbanks, a little more info on him. He spent a lot of money on color tests before making that movie. This was a period that was like really the very beginning of film, and what was the beginning of the golden age of Hollywood. And that actually, the golden age of Hollywood was considered that until about 1969. Anyway, that's the 1926 vibe. That was what was going on. So the reason we bring up Douglas Fairbanks is he has a connection, as we mentioned, to the Roosevelt, which was built in 1926. So it was financed by a group that included Louis B. Mayer, Mary Pickford, and her husband, Douglas Fairbanks, and Sid Grauman. It cost $2.5 million. Guess how much that would be today?
Like 25 million or something.
43.9 million today.
See, the thing I love about silent film actors is their careers are very much like TikTok stars. You know, because TikTok stars, they're also doing a lot of the the same sort of film tricks that silent film directors and silent film actors were doing. And they also had these huge followings. And basically, like, they're just playing with this new medium and then becoming super rich and then buying a bunch of real estate.
So it was the original TikTok.
Silent film was the original TikTok. And I have a feeling silent films would play really well on the TikTok format because the same kind of entertainment value is there, like the physical comedy, the thrills and the shock and everything. And TikTok uses the, intertitles too, in the same way that silent film does.
And showing your face, using your face as a character with the emotions. I mean,
and makeup is a huge part of silent film and a huge part of TikTok.
Yeah.
I'm going to write a TED Talk about the parallels between silent film and TikTok.
Great. That'd be awesome. So, do you know much about Douglas Fairbanks?
Yeah, not a whole lot, but I know that he was the first president of the Motion Picture Academy. And
he was born in 1883. And his father abandoned his family when he was 5. He did have an older brother, brought up by their mother, and...
Oh, he has a really great grave at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery.
Yes, that's right. I've seen that. He was expelled from high school for cutting the strings on a school piano, left school at 15, and then, get this, he began at that time touring the country with an acting troupe. So he started acting very young. He was performing on Broadway by 1902.
So he's in his teens on Broadway.
And silent films in 1915.
So he's like barely 20.
Yeah. He was Hollywood's most popular actor at the time, and he was known for his swashbuckling performances because he always played the dashing hero, which he was doing by 1918, so he was still very young. This is interesting to avoid being controlled by the studios because, we have the studio system being born
he founded United Artists with Charlie Chaplin and...
D.W. Griffith and his wife, Mary Pickford.
Yeah.
Yep. And that gave them complete...
But imagine, like, TikTokers doing this, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Like we are going to control TikTok. We are going to make sure that we don't get exploited.
And have artistic control, which is what they wanted over all their films and the profits they generated. So that was really interesting. And now this is a fun fact that I love because I love going to Grauman's. He was the first to have his hands and feet in the cement there. So he did have an incredible career in films, but we saw the decline of his career with the onset of the talking pictures. That happened in kind of less than 2 years.
I wonder why that was, because he did
technical restrictions.
Oh, because...
Well, he wasn't enthusiastic anymore.
That's a huge thing to talk about, because in the silent film era, they were putting like the camera on ropes and like swinging it around, and actors were doing really great things with their bodies, and Buster Keaton
very physical.
And Charlie Chaplin, very exciting. And then in that like first decade of talkies, the actors are kind of all grouped around like a flower basket that had like the microphone hidden in it, and it became very static. Yeah, so the transition from artful silent films that were very physical and movement oriented and very visually creative to this very static talking pictures where people are kind of limited by how far they can move away from a microphone.
Just think about how crazy that would have been, that transition as a performer to never use your voice, to completely going, oh my God, I have to have an accent, I have to speak a certain level for the microphone to pick up. And that really dampened his enthusiasm, and he slowly quit acting. So director Victor Fleming, who had watched this decline with his mentor, Douglas Fairbanks, what happened was Victor eventually helped Gary Cooper and Clark Gable kind of rise and become the new kings of Hollywood, which Douglas Fairbanks had been. So all of that kind of happened, and he finally retired from acting.
So he had a pretty short acting career. Like 1915 to like 1926,
27. Yeah, right in there. And he was married to, of course, famous actress Mary Pickford, but they divorced. And he started traveling. He traveled the globe and was involved in all kinds of things around the the world. Married a British model, and they had about a 2-year honeymoon, and then he died. He suffered a heart attack in 1939. He was only 56.
But his legacy lives on. You know, that's the crazy thing. Some people have a short career, and their memory and their legacy of what they did lives on. And some people have like a really long life and a long career.
Yeah.
Your impact doesn't depend on how long you live.
True. And we know that from another Hollywood icon, Marilyn Monroe, that I talked about in the last episode. She has a connection to the Roosevelt. She lived there for 2 years. She shot her first print ad at the hotel by the famous Tropicana pool. And she lived in the second floor cabana that overlooked the pool.
And I did look on the Roosevelt website. There's a Marilyn Monroe suite, and is that the room that she lived in? So you could technically go.
It's the most requested room. It's the most requested room in the whole hotel.
And see if you can communicate with her ghost there.
She actually, it's been said she met her future husband, Arthur Miller, in the Cinegrill there, in that nightclub. Her ghost is in room 1200. That's where she lived. And many guests have reported seeing, it's a full-length mirror, seeing her whole image in the mirror, and it became such a problem, scaring the guests, that the staff moved the mirror into the hallway. No, it's still there.
Okay.
But it's in the hallway. So
you could technically go upstairs, find the mirror as a non-paying guest.
You need to do that.
Yeah.
It's on the second floor.
Second floor.
Room 1200.
It's really cool. Let's find that mirror.
Let's find that mirror.
Yeah.
She's also been seen, her spirit has been seen dancing in the ballroom. It's called the Blossom Ballroom, and it's very haunted. I'll tell you in a minute about some other hauntings. But that's the room where the first Academy Awards were held.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she's been seen in other areas of the hotel too, but those are the most haunted, if you will, by Marilyn. What's kind of interesting is she worked, of course, with Montgomery Clift, who is also a guest at the Hollywood Roosevelt and who also is allegedly a ghost that haunts it. She once described Clift in a 1961 interview as the only person I know who's in worse shape than I am.
Yeah.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah. He had a car accident and he was like in a lot of pain, and he self-medicated with.
Yeah. He did get 4 Academy Awards.
Yeah.
He was Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, but it was kind of the last 20 years of his career. It declined, and he was using painkillers and alcohol. He acted erratically in public.
I'm sure he was also suffering from being closeted in a very homophobic society.
Yeah, he felt he was never accepted, and allegedly he struggled his entire life with that. His acting teacher, Robert Lewis, once stated that he had the longest suicide in Hollywood history because he just declined over this period of
that car crash, and then
alcoholism,
the self-medicating
and the hiding of being gay.
Yeah.
Had a heart attack at the age of 45.
Oh no.
Yeah. Okay, now Montgomery Clift's ghost has also been seen at the Roosevelt. So he played the trumpet, and he was known for being in the hotel playing the trumpet when he was alive. He continued doing this after he died because people have seen his ghost playing the trumpet all over the hotel.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
Yeah. And his spirit is supposedly brushed up against people. They feel him and see him. This is so dark and so weird. Some have reported feeling his spirit holding them down on the bed.
Ooh, wow.
So this has been a complaint of guests that have had that experience, and some of them don't want to go back to the hotel. I don't know how recent the last complaint of that was.
How are these people complaining? Are they like leaving Yelp reviews? I stayed at the hotel and a ghost like held me down on the bed. Or are they going up to the front desk and being like, I would like a refund because a ghost held me down on the bed?
Montgomery Clift, to be specific.
And it's like, can you please do something about Montgomery Clift?
Yeah, he's died in 1966, and it's 2024, and I'm being held up. I don't know when the last time that was reported, but it was reported quite a bit. Anyway, yeah, he never married, never had any children. There are some other ghosts that are really interesting at the Hollywood Roosevelt. There is repeated reports of a little girl about the age of 5 who her name is Carolyn, allegedly, and she is seeking out her mother. She's looking all over the hotel calling out for her mother.
Wow.
She didn't die there. There are 2 male spirits that are both in tuxedos that haunt the hotel, one in a black tuxedo and one in a white tuxedo. The one in the black...
Boyfriends, husbands.
Yeah.
Wedding cake
disgruntled
toppers.
Actors that wanted to go to... Well, one of them, the one in the black tuxedo, he's always seen in that Blossom Ballroom that Marilyn has been seen dancing in. And allegedly he was an award nominee and he attended the Oscars. Now, no one has said what his name would be. I don't know who would be having this report without his name, but he's a disgruntled actor that went to the awards and he's really attached to his career and dreams and he doesn't want to leave. He's staying at the awards in his tuxedo. And then the alleged male spirit in the white tuxedo, he's over the mezzanine. He's always seen over that balcony at a piano, playing a piano. And when you hear the piano and then you look over the balcony, you see him for a split second and he disappears.
Oh, okay.
And some say that he looks like Errol Flynn.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Which we should talk about Errol Flynn in another episode because he is a really, really interesting Hollywood history past.
I kind of wonder if Black Tuxedo was Douglas Fairbanks.
Oh, maybe. That would make sense.
Yeah.
You know, because of the decline and kind of eventually being left out of the Hollywood, you know,
although
community.
it could be a lot of people.
Yeah. There is also allegedly someone swimming in the pool, a spirit swimming in the pool that is seen by security guards in the CCTV and the security cameras. And they go rushing out there because this is after the pool closes. It has a curfew time and there's never anybody there.
Oh, wow.
So in the short time they see this person swimming, they dash out, nobody there. Anyway, that's a whole lot of history about the Hollywood Roosevelt, but I have never been I've only gone to like the main area, the Cinegrill. I don't know. Would you stay in any of those rooms?
Oh, yeah. I would definitely book the Maryland room.
Would you?
And see if we could feel anything.
I'm curious if any of our listeners have ever been and stayed in one of those rooms. If you have, let us know.
Write in.
I want to hear about your experiences.
Yeah.
All right, what do you have, Carly?
Okay, I'm going to tell you about Aimee Semple McPherson. I actually became aware of her existence when I was at my favorite cemetery, the Forest Lawn Glendale.
Oh, that's where Michael Jackson is.
Yeah, that's my favorite cemetery. It's so beautiful. It's got a whole bunch of celebrities there. They have this huge old mausoleum, and you can go down into the underneath portion of the mausoleum, and it's so cool. And there's also all this art there. There's a tomb out front of the mausoleum for Aimee Semple McPherson, and I remember saying, like, wow, this tomb is huge. It's almost like roped off with these like metal roped off areas. It's all white. So I remember Googling her and saying like, oh, she's some head of some church. Okay. Then I came across her story again when we were looking up 1926 things, and 1926 was the year that she had her disappearance. Let's dive into learning about the life and the disappearance and the return of Aimee Semple McPherson. So she was born on a small farm in Salford, Ontario, Canada on October 9th, 1890. So she's a Libra. Her parents are Methodists. Here's the thing, guys. I don't know anything about Christianity at all. So there's a lot of nuances to Christianity that I needed to Google, and I'm probably gonna get things not right. So be warned. I Googled what a Methodist is. It's a doctrine that emphasizes the power of the Holy Spirit, the need for a personal relationship with God, simplicity of worship, and concern for the underprivileged. So that would explain why Aimee's mom was all about volunteering for the Salvation Army and doing soup kitchens all her life. It was something that Aimee originally was kind of annoyed with. She rebelled. She would read novels and watch movies, which was not something her parents were about.
And what year was this?
So she's growing up in 1890. So in her early childhood, like in the early 1900s, you know, think of the first movies were like Nickelodeons and silent film, those scandalous silent films, although it was pre-Hays Code, and pre-Hays Code films are amazingly cool. Oh, Douglas Fairbanks, by the way, he had a really cool pre-Hays Code film. It was called cocaine film.
What?
And the main, Google Douglas Fairbanks cocaine film. So anyway, Douglas Fairbanks did this silent film about a coke addict, and it was very hilarious because it just treated drug use like they were very blasé about it. And it was
ironic.
Like, he had a really funny name too. It was Cokey Everdy or something, like for Coke. Every day. And that was a Douglas Fairbanks character.
Ow.
Yeah, and it was like 1916. So maybe I can understand why silent films were a little bit scandalous because pre-Hays Code. But when she goes to high school, she's introduced to the theory of evolution for the first time. She reads it in a geography book. And this is what her reaction was. She wrote this in her book. I was falling down, down, down into a black coal chute where leering specters jeered. There is no God, there is no heaven, there is no hell. If the scriptures tell one lie, they must leak like a sieve. She cornered her professor, telling him, I have been brought up to believe that my Bible is infallible. Yes, go on, he said. I find my new textbook diametrically opposed to its teachings. Would you please tell me which to believe? Looking down from his superior years of height and wisdom, he smiled tolerantly. Your Bible is wonderful classic literature. As such, it is worthy of your notice and study, but as to its scientific value and early history of the human race, it is woefully bigoted and misinformed. Ancient superstitions have been superseded by biological research. Then the school book, she asked, is correct, he snapped. And the Bible is filled with falsehoods, with errors, he amended. In response to this, Aimee wrote, I stood staring at the titles of the suggested books and was soon in the town library reading Voltaire, Ingersoll, Paine, and others. If they were true, then religion was a travesty and a farce. Church bells were hollow mockery. Fox's martyrs had died in vain cause. Missionaries were misguided souls. Prayer was a useless, superstitious repetition. She had an existential crisis and decided to make it everyone's problem. She writes a letter to a Canadian newspaper calling on fellow students to rally and stand by the sacred old truths which, through the ages, have withstood storm, bean's nose, and risen triumphant above every blast in spite of all the cold-blooded reasoning of scientists.
I see our third co-host has entered the room.
But Beans has a lot to say about the Bible. So this letter is Aimee's first experience with fame because it gets published in the newspaper and people from all over the country respond. And she loves this.
So she loves the fame and the adoration.
The fame. Mm-hmm. And it's like when you're a teen and you're like, I'm mad about this thing. I'm going to post on Twitter. And then you become Twitter famous because of your rant. You're like, hey, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm getting rewarded. People from all over the country respond, and so begins her lifelong anti-evolution crusade. Now, there's a whole lot of details, like I said, about Christianity that I don't know about, but one type of Christianity that plays an important role in this is charismatic Christianity. Charismatic tend to accept a range of supernatural experiences, such as prophecy, miracles, healing, or physical manifestations of an altered state of consciousness as evidence of having been filled with the Holy Spirit. In 1907, Aimee attends a sermon from a charismatic preacher named Roosevelt Semple. She's 17, he's 26. And he's a Pentecostal missionary from Ireland. So I'm sure she was like, this is a cute Irish accent, and you're giving me lots of attention. And
I wonder if she thought that when he was speaking in tongue.
Oh, yeah, that's the thing I read here. The Pentecostals, they speak in tongues.
They speak in tongue, and it's not words that any of us are used to hearing.
It's supposed to be like words from the Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit, yes.
Yeah. So they get married, and here's the thing, guys. No one who's over the age of 20 should be dealing with someone whose age starts with a 1. He's 9 years older than her. He's. I can't imagine being 26 and being like, yes, I want to marry this 17 17-year-old, but whatever. So she converts to Pentecostalism, which is where people speak in tongues, and they go to China for evangelical reasons, and they both get malaria. Robert actually dies. He's 29. He's having his Saturn return, which is when a lot of people actually die between the ages of 27 and 29 because of your Saturn return. Aimee, though, survives and gives birth to her daughter, Roberta Starr Semple. And she then goes on to marry Harold Stewart McPherson in 1912 and has her son, Rolf. She's really starting to feel like motherhood and being a wife is kind of boring. And she really wants to get out there and preach and get all that fame and that attention that she got when she was younger.
So she's kind of the original feminist.
Well, she does some feminist things, but she also kind of perpetuates kind of some non-feminist themes. So she's a person filled with duality. Yeah. She actually gets appendicitis, and it's so bad she almost dies. Her husband sends a telegram to her mother that's like, her life hangs in the balance. On this Christian website, it's described that she's like really, really sick in the hospital. She's taken into the room where basically the people who are going to die get taken to just kind of die. And she's struggling to breathe. She hears the nurse say she's going, as in she's going to die. And then she hears a voice, "Now will you go?" And she understood this as will she go to heaven or will she go to the ministry? And she decides this is her chance to go into ministry. And instantly, she said the pain was gone, her breathing eased, and she regained her strength. And then in 1915, she takes her children, she leaves her husband to go do evangelical work. And she sends him later on, after she's kind of getting followers and doing her thing, she sends him a letter inviting him to come along with her if he wants to. And she's the first woman to drive across the country by car without the company of a man. And eventually the husband decides to go with her. They sell their house. They live in a gospel car that's plastered with Bible verses and slogans. Where will you spend eternity? And Jesus saves and all that stuff. And she tours the American South. She gets her followers and she starts publishing a monthly magazine that mobilizes her following. She's getting press attention. She heads to Los Angeles. And this is around the time where she really starts doing these faith healing demonstrations. So people come to her, they're sick, and she puts her hands on them and heals them with the power of the Holy Spirit.
And that had already been done in history.
Yeah.
Before that. So she just perpetuated this
and in a
hands-on
way. You could say she healed herself. She healed herself of malaria. She healed herself of appendicitis. There's also a case where she hurt her foot and she healed herself. Who knows how much of this is exaggeration, but that's what things are saying in here. She and her daughter catch the Spanish flu in 1918, and Aimee didn't get very sick. Her daughter almost dies, and while praying for her daughter's health, Aimee receives a vision in which God told her to stay and make a home in California. So that's what she does. That is when she becomes super famous. She sells out like the largest auditoriums in all of America's largest cities. She has stretcher days where people come in on stretchers and she heals them. And even Charlie Chaplin, who's an atheist, listens to her, because she's so entertaining. During the 1920s, she's a sensation. She goes to Australia. Other pastors tell their people to go listen to her. She gets a broadcast license, the first woman to get a broadcast license from the Department of Commerce. She starts a radio station for her church. She's the first televangelist. She's also the first woman to preach a sermon wirelessly on the radio.
So she sort of set things up for the Tammy Faye Bakers
exactly.
of the televangelist world.
Exactly. And she also founds the first mega church. She founds Angelus Temple in Echo Park, which holds 5,300 people.
Is that still there?
It's still there, and it's mostly like a Latin church now, and that's the main folks who attend. Aside from that temple, her Foursquare church still has 8 million followers all around the globe. And later in this, I write down how many churches, but there's like 1,000 churches that are like from that main church that she set up.
Wow.
She becomes a huge supporter of William Jennings Bryan, who was the presidential candidate, but who also was the Scopes monkey trial, like, fighter against evolution. And he's an interesting story too, because he started off really like anti-colonialism, and you read his early writings and you're like, I like this guy. And then he gets into the super religious anti-evolution stuff and you're like, oh. So by 1926, the year that she goes disappearing, she is an A-lister. And here's a few details of her faith healing that she did. On Long Island in 1916, a young woman with rheumatoid arthritis is brought to the altar by friends, just as Aimee preaches, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And Aimee lays her hands on the woman's head, and the woman is able to leave the church without crutches. That same year, a lamp blows up in her face and burns her skin, but her skin is instantly healed, allegedly. And Aimee's mother, Mildred, says she witnessed visible cancers disappear, the deaf hear, the blind see, the disabled walk. Mexican-American actor Anthony Quinn at the time says, he describes her whole thing. There was a blind man who was brought up to the stage, and then suddenly he cried, yes, sister, I can see, I can see. There was a woman dragging herself across the stage on crutches, and Aimee says, throw away your crutch. And suddenly the woman threw away her crutch and ran into Aimee's open arms and left the service exhilarated and renewed. So all these stories, and part of them, what do you think about these, Tanya? Like,
I think the power of the mind is really potent.
You show up to a thing, you're like, I'm hurt or disabled or whatever, and you're like, I'm going to get healed today, and you have so much pressure from everyone there witnessing you.
Yeah, well, like I said, power of the mind too. When someone's got an audience, when someone who is renowned in healing is telling you you're going to walk, I think maybe some of that is a burst of adrenaline.
Yeah.
And I have to wonder the next day.
Yeah.
What happened? Because think about it. We never hear about the next day after these faith healings.
Yeah.
What happened to the guy that was on a stretcher and miraculously stands up? Did he go back on the stretcher?
Yeah.
Because I want to know.
I'd love to hear if any of you have ever been faith healed. Write in and tell us your stories.
She must have really faith healed Anthony Quinn, because that man was breeding children in his 80s. He had some potent man sperm.
So I'm dubious about the faith healing. She did do good things, though. Anthony Quinn says all you had to do was pick up the phone and say, I'm hungry, and within an hour there'd be a food basket there. She literally kept most of the Mexican community alive for many years.
So she was a good person. She was charitable. She was a philanthropic lady.
There was floods and earthquakes in Los Angeles, and she organized relief efforts. She made sure people got meals during the Depression when they were unemployed. Her services were also racially integrated, especially important during the rise of the KKK. In fact, a bunch of KKK members showed up to her church, her integrated church, and she just stared them down until they left.
Wow. So was she one of the first that actually stood at the pulpit? Because women, we still to this day do not have Catholic female priests.
Well, it's not Catholic, it's Christian.
No, yeah. So I'm just
I don't
wondering,
know
within Christianity, if she sort of broke the mold for female evangelists.
Yeah, I don't know what was allowed. I don't know anything about that whole area. So you guys write in and tell us. I remember I actually went to a church once with a friend who was Lutheran, who was very religiously Lutheran, and there was a woman speaking, and she was like, women are not allowed to speak, and I was like, oh, okay.
Catch fire or something like that.
Okay. Speak in front of a church service. So I don't know. There's different genres of Christianity.
Yeah, of course. I was just wondering, because there probably weren't very many women at that time that were standing up in front of a church.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. So let's get to, she's doing a lot of good things. Okay, the bad thing that she did was that she was campaigning heavily to place Bibles in every Los Angeles public school classroom and remove evolution from the curriculum.
Wow, that is just...
So...
To this day, we fight that.
Why are we still fighting this?
It's 2024... And we still are dealing with this.
She was doing this in 1924, and it's 2024, and we're still dealing with these people.
When you think about it.
Who are trying to put Bibles in the school. My goodness. So on May 18th, 1926, Aimee goes with her secretary to Ocean Park Beach for a swim. Aimee puts on a green bathing suit. Then the secretary has to leave to go make a phone call at a nearby hotel because they didn't have cell phones back then. And when she returns, she scans the beach. She slowly begins to panic. She can't find Aimee anywhere.
And how old is Aimee at this point?
So it's 1926. She was born in 1890. So she's 36.
She's very young.
Evening falls, and Aimee's church followers begin converging on the beach. One young man sees something out in the horizon. He swims for it, and he actually drowns in the process.
Oh.
And that object that he was swimming for turns out to be 2 dead seals. In total, 2 people would die searching for her. The other is a Captain Ed Harrison, who died from pneumonia from strenuous diving in the icy waters. Soon there are even reports that a sea monster has been sighted off Venice Beach, leading to theories that Aimee got eaten by a sea monster. After a day of searching, Aimee is presumed dead. In fact, she was supposed to preach a sermon that evening, but her mother does it instead, telling those in attendance that Aimee is with Jesus, and people just lose their minds.
Question. So what part of the beach that we know the beach today would this have taken place?
It just says Ocean Park Beach. I'm sure I could research.
Ocean Park Beach. Okay, I kind of know where that's at.
You know where what does it look like?
Venice, down.
Yeah.
If it's Ocean Park, it's that's where the boardwalk kind of starts in that area.
I don't know what it looked like in 1926.
So I don't know when we'll have to look when the boardwalk was built.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because now it's super populated. So that's why I was curious. Was it populated at that time?
If there was a hotel nearby to make a phone call, then probably.
Then probably so.
Yeah. So mourners crowd Venice Beach. There's intense media coverage fueled by William Randolph Hearst's Los Angeles Examiner. And also a poem gets written by Upton Sinclair. I have the poem here. I don't know if I should read it, but it's interesting because Upton Sinclair would eventually write some very critical things about Aimee. And he was always very against all the religious stuff. But he writes this kind of touching poem about her. That gets a lot of press too. Someone makes a really important meme on Twitter about someone's death and it gets, retweeted.
Yeah.
So people were retweeting Upton Sinclair's poem about her. I'll put it in the show notes. It's long. And that's not, like I said, that's not the first inspiration Upton would get from Aimee. Upton would write Oil, his novel Oil, which was published in 1927, and the character Eli was inspired by Aimee Semple McPherson. And in the movie There Will Be Blood, which is based off Oil, the Paul Dano character is the Aimee Semple McPherson character.
Wow, and he did a tremendous job. So interesting what her personality and character, how much of that entered the writing of that character in the movie.
When you actually read Oil, there is a whole section about this incident.
Was it a male character in the book as well as
it was a male character in the book. Yeah. He writes, the story spread all over the front page day after day. The body of Eli could not be found. The people of the temple employed divers. They had searchlights sweeping the water at night, and thousands of faithful patrolling the sands, holding revival services there, weeping and praying to God to give them back their beloved leader in his green bathing suit. He was really writing about her. And after the real Aimee story is wrapped up, I'll read you Upton Sinclair's version of how it wrapped up, which is his theory of what happened. But he isn't the first to get inspiration from her. There would be a lot of books, films, and plays derived from this story. So back to 1926, the search continues. Daily updates appear in newspapers across the country, and parishioners hold day and night seaside vigils. A detective claims to have seen her at a railway station in San Francisco. Oh, by the way, here's a cartoon. This is basically what it was like back then. It's a cartoon showing like basically New York City with a huge banner that says, Aimee, question, question, question. The Great Mystery Publicity Forum, continuous performance. So, and all these people are like, Aimee, Aimee, Aimee. Front page.
Wow.
Major news story. And as the 5 weeks progressed, all the different theories of what happened to her, you know, this is like a Madeleine McCann sort of situation.
So then we know that never got resolved.
Yeah. So on June 19th, almost a month after Aimee's disappearance, a ransom note arrives addressed to Aimee's mother at the Angelus Temple. We took her for 2 reasons. First, to wreck that damn temple, and second, to collect a tiny $500,000. This is a long letter I have here. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Maybe I'll put the whole thing in the show notes. It's very full of 1920s gangsta talk.
Very good impression of that, Carly.
But they're asking for a cool $500,000, $500,000. And it's also like, she's a pain in the ass. We're sick of her. We're going to do terrible things to her if we don't get our $500,000.
Very mobster of you.
Yeah. In the ensuing 5 weeks, the front pages of newspapers carry headlines of various theories. It was a real unsolved mysteries. The 1920s true crime girlies are having their day. From the Smithsonian Magazine, in the coming days, her followers were dynamite the waters of Santa Monica Bay, hoping to raise her body from the depths. Yet the blasts surface only dead fish. Imagine all the fish that she killed. And the passing time merely gave rise to countless rumors. She disappeared to have an abortion or plastic surgery or an affair. As the days turned to weeks, McPherson's body, much to the chagrin of police and the California Fish and Game Commission, remained missing. Some faithful church members believe she would be resurrected by supernatural powers. Around 3 a.m. in the morning. This is about the time Tanya usually goes to sleep.
Yeah, that's my bedtime.
June 23rd, Aimee stumbles into the Mexican town of Agua Prieta. A taxi driver takes her across the border to Douglas in Arizona, where she goes to a hospital. Once there, the police and nurses inspect the welts around her wrists, which she says was due to being tied up. She tells a story of being kidnapped by a couple at the beach who lured her by asking her to heal an ailing infant. After being pulled into their car, Aimee is driven by the band of kidnappers named Jake, Steve, and Mexicali Rose into the desert and held there and bound.
That's a great name for a band.
Mexicali Rose.
Yeah.
On the day of her escape, the gang had left Aimee unattended. She rolled off her cot, found a jagged can lid. She used the can lid to sever the ropes binding her wrists. Freed, she pushed through a window and then ran across the Mexican desert for 17 hours until she comes across a house in Agua Prieta in the early hours the next morning. Aimee says while in captivity, the 3 captors burned her hands with cigars if she refused to cooperate. A nurse notes that Aimee has no sunburns, no cracked lips, or pronounced blisters on her feet. Strange if she'd walked in the sun for 17 hours. Her clothes are clean, there's no rips or dust. When Aimee returns to Los Angeles, 50,000 people show up at the train station. There's a parade, airplanes drop roses from the sky.
Mexicali Rose.
A journalist in LA named Mauro Mayo writes, thousands wept and cheered. A pilot engine loaded to the cow catcher with armed guards preceded the train. The police department detailed special guards to protect her on her arrival. The city council and the sheriff's department welcomed her officially. She was carried from the train in a chair of roses. When her feet touched the pavements were carpeted with flowers. Many presidents have visited Los Angeles, but no other man or woman was given such an ovation in the history of this city.
Insane.
The DA starts an investigation into Aimee's account of the kidnapping. 2 weeks later, she's voluntarily appearing before a grand jury as newspapers are accusing her of fraud. Witnesses are coming forward claiming to have seen her in Northern California. But what really happened?
I want to know, because right now I was going along with the theory that she was kidnapped, but then the lack of blisters and the clean clothes, I don't think that's what happened.
Let's meet Kenneth Ormiston. He's the radio engineer at Angelus Temple. He was the guy who set up her radio station, was working with her closely. He's a guy who walks with a pronounced limp. He leaves employment at the temple in January of 1926. He leaves about the same time that Aimee goes on a European vacation. So they're both Kenneth and Aimee are not at the temple around January. Kenneth's wife files a missing person report that tells the police he had left her for a prominent woman. 9 days after Aimee's disappearance, Kenneth suddenly appears again, and he's refuting these accusations that he had somehow left with Aimee. The Sacramento Union newspaper reports a day later that they have received proof that Aimee is alive. A witness reports that she'd seen Aimee with a man who had an unusual gait, and they were having a beachside conversation at Carmel by the Sea. Kenneth has a limp. This guy has an unusual gait, and
this is all very sus.
Yeah. At a gas station on May 28th, a blue Chrysler coupe with the license number F31052, registered to Kenneth Ormiston, was seen. In the passenger seat is a woman wearing large glasses hiding her identity. Based on these tips, the police go to a cottage in Carmel by the Sea where Kenneth has been spotted with this unidentified woman. After dusting the cottage, they don't find any prints that match Aimee's, though. Ken does admit to having an affair during Aimee's disappearance, but denies that Aimee was the one he had an affair with. Let's go back to Upton Sinclair. We'll circle around to basically his theory, which he published in Oil. So Upton writes, "Of course there were skeptics, people with the devil in their hearts who refused to believe Eli's story and persisted in talking about a blue-colored automobile driven by a good-looking girl having a heavily veiled man wearing goggles in the seat beside her. They talked about signatures on hotel registers, handwriting experts, and other such obscenities. But all that made no difference to the glory shouters at the tabernacle, which was packed all day and all night, as never before in the history of religions." The media frenzy continues through the fall. A judge rules that there's enough evidence to charge Aimee with obstruction of justice and move ahead with a jury trial in January. The DA, however, decides that some of the witnesses are unreliable and drop the charges. It's alleged that Aimee came up with $30,000 to appease law enforcement officials.
There it is, right there.
Yep.
There it is.
If it's a kidnapping, the authorities never catch the kidnappers. If it was a hoax, it's never prosecuted. Her popularity continues to rise and the church continues to grow. What do you think happened? I have my theories.
I think she had an affair. She sinned. She's a woman that shouldn't be sinning.
Yeah.
And she sinned. And she had to do what she had to do.
What was she planning to do? What was she planning on, faking her disappearance forever and running off with this guy?
I think that it started out that way. And then
people started seeing her.
I think that
and Kenneth was probably like, "Oh fuck, they found my car. They know it's me."
I think they plotted this whole thing because
I think it didn't go according to plan. I think when Kenneth's car got found, I think and the newspaper reports happened. I think he was like, "Aimee, you need to do something. I I don't want to be the center of public attention. My wife filed a missing persons report. You need to do something, Aimee. And Amy's like, I'm going to pretend I was kidnapped.
Yeah, I think it started off for her to be gone forever.
Yeah.
And because plans went awry, they concocted this story.
Yeah.
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 So how old was she when she passed away?
So on September 27th, 1944, Aimee Semple McPherson passes away at the age of 53 in a room in the Leamington Hotel in Oakland.
What did she die of?
I'll get to that. So the Leamington Hotel, really, really interesting story. It was built in 1926, the day of her disappearance. And in the 40s, it's like one of the hottest spots for dining and dancing. In fact, just a few years earlier, Amelia Earhart had an office there while she was preparing to circumnavigate the globe in 1937, the year that Amelia Earhart would go missing.
Ironic. Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Twinky-dink right there.
I know. But this is, Amelia Earhart went missing 7 years. No,
7 years. Yeah.
No.
9 years later, right? No, wait.
11 years.
11
We're good at math.
We have other skills. Math, no.
Amelia Earhart went missing 11 years after
but
Aimee.
Still, that's still very weird.
But it's weird that they had the same connection to this hotel.
Yeah.
So Aimee had suffered from OCD and insomnia for many years. Some sources say that she'd taken too many sleeping pills. Beans, you have so many opinions about this. Some sources say that she'd taken too many sleeping pills. Her church website says that she'd been suffering from a bacterial infection picked up in Mexico that led to insomnia, and a tube ruptured in her kidney that caused a sleeping pill medication to directly enter her system. She died with only $10,000 to her estate.
No. Unlike most televangelists.
But yeah, I guess she put it all back into the community. Her body was flown back to Los Angeles, and she's currently buried at a huge, huge tomb in Forest Lawn, Glendale, which is gorgeous. Go check it out. Her Foursquare Church still exists to this day and claims a membership of 8.4 million worldwide and includes 87,000 churches in 147 different countries.
Wow. So she had a much bigger influence than a lot of evangelists of the time would have had.
And today, the Angelus Temple is mostly a Latin community, and her radio station laid the way for America's modern televangelists. Her story has inspired so many artists. Cole Porter used her as the inspiration for Reno Sweeney in Anything Goes, in 1934, which made Ethel Merman a star. This is all from the LA Public Library website. A year after Aimee's disappearance, a play called Bless You, Sister premiered on Broadway, and it's all about a preacher's daughter who loses her faith and is convinced by a slimy con man to become a phony faith healer. Evelyn Waugh's novel, Vile Bodies, which would become a movie called Bright Young Things, is published in 1930, and it includes an American evangelist named Mrs. Melrose Ape, and Aimee had been to Europe twice, so it's theory that, she inspired that. In 1931, Frank Capra made the film The Miracle Woman, starring Barbara Stanwyck and David Manners, about a religious con artist who falls in love with a blind parishioner. It's pre-Hays Code, so if it wouldn't have never been made after 1934, but it was made while she was still alive.
Wonder if she had much influence in that.
Well, it's very critical of religious leaders. Like it's all
right. But I wonder if she was fighting it in any way.
I wonder. A 1949 film called Woman of the Rock follows a PR man named Herb Wallace, who has been asked to read the secret autobiography of one of his former clients, a Los Angeles evangelist who recently passed away, and her final request is that the manuscript she penned be published upon her death. Church leaders, however, are hoping to destroy the manuscript, as revelations in her story might be seen as antithetical to the wholesome image she projected. The song The Ballad of Aimee McPherson is recorded by American folk singer Pete Seeger. And this passage goes, "They found a cottage with a breakfast nook, a folding bed with a worn-out look. The slats were busted and the springs were loose, and the dents in the mattress fitted Aimee's caboose."
Oh, goodness. That's not where I thought that song was going.
The female evangelist, big sister in John Schlesinger's 1975 film, The Day of the Locust, does not appear in the novel of the same name, but is possibly inspired by Aimee. And one of the first films to directly portray Aimee Semple McPherson is the 1976 TV film The Disappearance of Aimee, which was on NBC. In 1981, Aimee, exclamation point, was the first time Aimee's story was brought to the stage as a musical. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that is just something I don't expect to ever be a musical. Yeah. It's just the first of the Aimee musicals. In 2012, Scandalous represents the second time Aimee's life is put to music. And it's a play, a musical that was written by Kathy Lee Gifford and funded by Betsy DeVos.
Okay, this just gets stranger and stranger.
And actually, it ends up winning a Tony nomination for the lead actress Carolee Carmello, who played Aimee. So she got a Tony nomination for Best Actress in a Musical. Samantha Buck and Mary Schliemann's 2019 film Sister Aimee focuses on the disappearance. And in 2020, Tatiana Maslany.
She's such a good actress.
She's such a good actress.
Wow,
oh my God.
That is such a good show.
Yeah.
You guys, if you haven't seen that, just watch it.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
She plays Sister Alice McKeegan in the new Perry Mason HBO series, which is set in 1930s Los Angeles. And her whole hair, her outfit is like she's
Aimee.
She's Aimee, yeah. And so that is the story, the life, the disappearance, the death of Aimee Semple McPherson.
That is a fascinating story. Beans liked it too. What do you think, Beans? Beans is licking his fur right now, so I think the jury's still out on his opinion.
So what are you looking forward to? What are you working on? What are you hopeful for?
I'm working on a new TikTok project with our friend Heather Alexander, and we are working on a Christmas duo. So,
yay! I want Heather on the show because Heather has a whole bunch of stories.
She's got a lot of woo-woo.
Yeah.
And a lot of crystals.
Yeah.
Like us. So we're knee-deep on that right now. What about you?
Well, I'm just really excited. Like, in 2 weeks, we've gotten 5 episodes of the show written, edited, produced, and launched.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah,
well, thanks to you and your editing skills, of which I have none.
So, yeah, I can't wait for this to get out there.
I hope you guys like it.
Share it with your friends and leave ratings and reviews and give us a follow, especially on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to follow us on Instagram, Haunted Hollywood Hour Podcast, all one word. Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.